Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today we got to talk about this absolute absurdity, it being 2024, 4 years removed from the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting, which within 15 minutes, all of the videos were out there in the public, so anyone and everyone could know exactly what went down, that this is the most obvious case of self-defense in the history of ever, because again, we have the video of it, but yet those folks over at TYT, specifically John Iadarola and Francesca Fiorentini, have decided that no, actually Kyle Rittenhouse is still guilty, because we have this so-called new evidence that proves that Kyle Rittenhouse used his Jedi mind tricks in order to convince people to attack him on video, reach for his gun, and thus creating a situation where he could sinisterly murder them. And we're gonna get into this, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
Now, to be clear, right off the bat, we are talking about the damage report, which is in the TYT network. It is hosted by John Iadarola, but it is not the TYT main show, the TYT proper show, where Anna Kasparian has since her many a times referencing the crossing of state lines.
Wouldn't go out of his way to go to a protest who crossed state lines. He drove from Illinois to Kenosha, Wisconsin. Now, again, he drove from Illinois to Wisconsin. It's not like he was in his front yard and he was approached by a group of individuals who posed an imminent threat to his life. He drove across state lines in a state that he doesn't even live in, because obviously we're dealing with a 17-year-old from out of state, and then he crossed state lines with it. He crossed state lines, meaning he traveled across state lines. He traveled there from out of state, who again traveled across state lines. So he did not cross state lines with an illegal gun.
Come out and say that she has seen the information that was previously obscured from her by the left-wing media and said that Kyle Rittenhouse acted in self-defense, which we all knew. But John Iadarola still holding a candle for Kyle Rittenhouse being guilty, being an evil white racist filled with evil white racism, even though there's no evidence of that, and what he's going to present is not evidence of that.
At this point, you probably don't need to hear a person like me with my political opinions tell you, hey, Kyle Rittenhouse may not be a great person, and his accounting of what happened before he killed 2 people might not be 100% accurate. I mean, after all, I don't know the guy. I'm not gonna be persuasive.
So John Iadarola starts out by saying, you don't need somebody from my political persuasion to tell you that Kyle Rittenhouse isn't a good person, and his account of events before the shooting aren't actually accurate, and the truth is, no, we don't. There are videos of what went down that specific night. You can see people chasing him, like Joseph Rosenbaum, Kyle Rittenhouse running up until the point where he was trapped, Rosenbaum lunging for the gun, and Kyle Rittenhouse shooting him in that scenario. And by the way, the reason why this is such an unambiguous self-defense case is because if a crazy person chases you, and the most obvious thing about you is a giant rifle that you're carrying, you have an obligation not to let said crazy person grab that rifle from you, especially if he's threatened to kill people earlier that day, like Joseph Rosenbaum did. Now, it also turns out that Rosenbaum is a convicted pedophile, raping 5 boys between the ages of 9 and 12 years old. He was out of prison. He recently committed a domestic assault in which he was told that he could no longer live where he was living. So he wandered to the protest, ended up there, was looking for a confrontation, and all of that is backed up by video evidence as well. But John Iadarola says somebody on the inside is going to tell us different, and they're going to reference something that, by the way, in no way, shape, or form does anything to nerf the self-defense claim of Kyle Rittenhouse.
What if there was someone who did know him and is now spilling the beans? Well, we actually have that. It's his former spokesperson who has apparently had enough of Kyle Rittenhouse's lies about what he believes and what he intended to do and all that stuff. And so now he's revealing it.
So here you have this former spokesperson saying, oh, I knew all this stuff about Kyle Rittenhouse going in, and yet I still decided to work for him as a spokesman because I believed in the self-defense case and all that. Also paid no attention to the fact that I was just recently fired, but he says he has the goods on Kyle. He says he has the evidence, and you could just see John Iadarola frothing at the mouth in order to condemn this kid as a guilty person.
And so he's his former spokesperson, and he said, my first impression was a scared kid, arrogant, oblivious to the world around him. When he was telling me about the story, I believed he was being sincere. I believe things he told me that I now understand to be one of his many lies, and that hurts. That sucks.
Okay, so this is supposedly the goods right here. You have Kyle Rittenhouse sending text messages in response to a CVS shoplifting that he saw, that, by the way, we have video of. It's the video that the prosecution tried to enter into evidence, but it was considered propensity evidence, aka something that was not applicable at trial. But John says this new revelation, these text messages, are going to tell you everything you need to know about Mr. Kyle Rittenhouse and his evil white racism, and the fact that he somehow Jedi mind tricked Joseph Rosenbaum, Anthony Huber, and Gage Grosskreutz into attacking him.
He believed his self-defense claims initially until he learned of a number of text messages that Rittenhouse had sent in the weeks leading up to the killings. So the texts were in response to seeing shoplifters at a CVS pharmacy on August 10th, a little more than 2 weeks before the shooting in Kenosha. Here is some of what Rittenhouse said. "The world is disgusting. I wish they would come into my house. I will effing murder them."
So many of you out there in the audience are thinking to yourself right now in this moment, okay, those are the text messages about the CVS shoplifters. When is John going to get to his point? When is he going to present the evidence, present the proof that Kyle Rittenhouse did not act in self-defense, that the videos of him acting in self-defense don't actually exist anymore based on these text messages, because he didn't present anything there that contradicts the evidence that we've seen related to this specific incident. In fact, John seems to be just making stuff up based on his limited showing of these text messages, even though this is not proof positive of anything that he's claiming.
"The world is disgusting. I wish they would come into my house. I will effing murder them." So he said, I want an interaction with these protesters. I will kill protesters. And then 2 weeks later, he once again put himself into a situation where he could plausibly claim self-defense. And what do you know? Some people were murdered.
So just really quickly, I want you guys to understand the weaselly tactic that John just used right there, where he said that Kyle Rittenhouse is talking about protesters. Now, of course, people on the left conflated rioters with protesters, justified the rioting specifically and the violence, and John Iadarola is among those people. But to be clear, the video that we're talking about of the CVS doesn't have any protesters near it at all. It's just people looting a CVS. Again, we have video of the instance that this is referring to, and Kyle texting that he's disgusted with that, which it's disgusting behavior, so that makes perfect sense, and that if those people broke into his house, he would effing murder them, is not the same thing as I'm gonna go out and Jedi mind trick people into attacking me on video, making the most obvious self-defense case of all time. This isn't evidence of anything. John is just trying to amp this up from the Guardian article because he's pathetic in that he can't let go of the fact that Kyle Rittenhouse acted 100% in self-defense. It is obvious, it is caught on video, and anybody who is telling you to the contrary cannot think for themselves, has ignored the overwhelming majority of the evidence. And John has decided, right-wing bad, this guy ended up being attacked by left-wing supporters of Black Lives Matter, and by the way, some crazy pedophile that had nothing to do with the protest really, other than the fact that he showed up and he was accepted into the protest. And for some reason, John can't let it go now 4 years later.
Again, if you've convinced yourself at this point that he was just a good kid, he was just trying to protect other people that he doesn't know's property or whatever, then none of this is gonna change your mind.
Again, this guy has brain damage. He's like, oh, if you convince yourself that Kyle was just a good kid and he was trying to protect other people but that he doesn't even know his property, then nothing's gonna change your mind. John, if you're still talking about defending property with lethal force, nothing's going to change your mind because Kyle Rittenhouse was defending himself. Joseph Rosenbaum was targeting the gun. He was charging Kyle Rittenhouse, chased him through the parking lot. It is all on video, and Kyle has an obligation as somebody who is carrying a firearm to not let some crazy person take it because he might start killing people. On top of that, Kyle then runs to the police. Again, all of this is on video. It's not in dispute. And he is attacked by Huber, he's attacked by Jump Kick Man, and he is attacked by Gage Grosskreutz, who actually pulls a firearm on him, and Kyle only shoots him when he motions to get in a position to shoot Kyle. By the way, one of the things that came out at trial was that Joseph Rosenbaum, according to this drone footage, actually hid behind a vehicle specifically to jump out and ambush Kyle Rittenhouse, prior to the chase that you've seen a million times in the parking lot footage that is filmed from cell phones. But according to John Iadarola, Kyle Rittenhouse being angry about shoplifters 2 weeks earlier and saying if they broke into his house, then he would kill them if they again broke into his house, somehow makes him the initiator of force in his own ambush. That somehow takes away this drone footage and erases it from existence. That's how dumb John Iadarola thinks you are out there in his audience.
It's almost like we've set up a loophole for like prospective fantasizing murderers. It's almost like that because that's what it is in multiple states. And so I'm glad that Dave Hancock revealed this. It's not going to change anything. There's not going to be another trial or anything, but it is good to at least have more clarity.
So John starts talking about how, oh, these right-wingers are fantasizing about killing left-wingers, and then they actually do it, and therefore, they're guilty because they said something that I think is related to them saying something about protesters that actually isn't. And the fact of the matter is, this is one of the reasons why you should be very careful about what you text about, because scumbags like John Iadarola, and by the way, the prosecutor in the Wisconsin case, will try to use these words in completely different scenarios, in completely different hypothetical scenarios, to undercut your right to self-defense when they disagree with you politically, and that's exactly what John Iadarola is doing. It is perfectly normal to say if somebody comes into your house, breaks into your house, and puts you and your family under threat, that you will deal with them with the force required for them to do so. That being said, according to John Iadarola, if you say that in any context, and then later on video from multiple angles, you're attacked by multiple people in the most unambiguous example of self-defense humanly possible, then you're still guilty because you said at one time you would defend your home, and that's you murder fantasizing, according to John Iadarola.
What do you think?
I mean, well, why not? I know that one of the families of those who was murdered by Rittenhouse is actually seeking damages based on this evidence. I mean, and that we now know about his spokesperson coming out based on a documentary. Like, look, we are in a true crime time, and they have, in fact, reopened cases.
So at this point in time, I feel it is necessary for me to remind you guys out there in the audience that A, Francesca Fiorentini still exists. She's actually still making content. And B, she is just as uninformed, if not more uninformed, than you remember her. Because John made the point at the end of his little stupid rant that there's not going to be a second trial for Kyle Rittenhouse. And Francesca Fiorentini, who's somebody supposedly qualified to comment on situations like this, says, why not? We have a civil suit, and we live in the true crime era where they open up cases all the time. So why can't they just reopen this case and try him again? And I would answer that question to Francesca Fiorentini, somebody who, again, works for a media company, presumes some kind of knowledge related to the topics that she talks about with double jeopardy, which you should look up on your own, which clearly states that it is unconstitutional to try somebody for the same crime twice when they're found not guilty. On top of that, there's also a movie called Double Jeopardy. It's trashy, it's from the 2000s, but it turns out if you watch that movie, as ridiculous as its use of Double Jeopardy actually is, you'll have a better understanding of the American legal system than Francesca Fiorentini, a news commentator on the Young Turks network.
Look, Kyle Rittenhouse was so clearly gunning to kill people. He wanted to do that. That was his intention.
Again, the question that Francesca Fiorentini needs to ask herself, and all these lefties who hold this view that Kyle Rittenhouse went out there to kill people that night, is why did Kyle bother waiting for somebody to unprovoked attack him and chase him into a parking lot, which Kyle, by the way, fled until he got stuck and could no longer flee, for him to execute his plan to kill people? Did he mind control Joseph Rosenbaum in order to give him the absolute top tier self-defense case that was caught on video? On top of that, why did he only fire the necessary shots in order to nerf the threat that was Huber and Gage Grosskreutz? Again, if your allegation is that Kyle Rittenhouse planned on killing people, are you making the claim that he is a Lex Luthor level genius, or maybe even some guy with mind control powers who was able to conduct this operation so flawlessly that you have yet to produce a shred of evidence to support even a hint of your claim from that evening?
And you just laid it out. He laid it out himself. Here's his former spokesperson, who honestly, I'm like, how the hell are you Kyle Rittenhouse's spokesperson? But of course, now they have a pang of conscience, and they see some text messages and they're like, gee, maybe not. When it's all the coast is clear and it's safe and they've cashed their check and whatnot.
So Francesca says, oh, then they see the text messages and then they know, and all of a sudden their conscience kicks in and they realize that they're representing a brutal murderer, when in reality, that's not what happened. The guy got fired, he got angry, he leaked these messages. I also want to point out that during the course of the investigation into Kyle Rittenhouse, the Wisconsin district attorney actually cloned his phone. So they had all of these messages at the prosecutor's office, and this was considered so irrelevant that they didn't even try to bring this into the trial phase of this particular case. Remember, they were trying to make the case that Kyle was a member of an extremist group or something like that. Narratives that, by the way, were pushed by the Young Turks. Narratives, by the way, that were pushed by the broader left-wing media, even though that was not true as well. So they could have brought this evidence forward. They could have submitted it at trial. It would have gotten knocked down as completely unrelated, which is why they didn't even bother to do it. We didn't even hear about this in the pre-trial phase. What we did hear about was the video of these CVS shoplifters, and that is also completely unrelated to the fact that he was attacked on video by each and every person that he was shot, and additional people where he missed the shots, like Jump Kick Man, and nothing disputes that. You've brought up no counterpoint.
But I know some people who don't like looking at our country through a lens of racial justice or injustice will bristle at what I'm about to say. But for people who cannot help but looking at this country through the lens of racial injustice because they themselves are a racial minority, they themselves have been targeted, they themselves have been historically enslaved, oppressed, trafficked, denied voting rights, and locked away for, far less crimes. For people who've been sentenced to death, even though they were innocent, all you got to do is close your eyes and imagine if Kyle Rittenhouse were black. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know about this case. You just imagine
100%.
if he were black and wonder if he would have gotten off on all of the charges that he got off with.
This woman is legitimately brain dead, adds nothing to the conversation. She's now talking about slavery and racism, evil white racism, and making the case that if Kyle Rittenhouse were a black person, then he would not have been found not guilty on all counts. Again, put a black person in the same scenario with the videos, and he absolutely would. In fact, the same day that Kyle Rittenhouse was found not guilty, a black person with a criminal record who had criminal possession of a firearm was found not guilty for shooting at police officers when they were entering his home because they didn't announce themselves properly. Because again, the law is the law. On top of that, Kyle Rittenhouse killed white people. It has nothing to do with black people other than the fact that the Kenosha rioters were rioting over another lie about racial injustice, which of course was the Jacob Blake case, which was 100% a justified shooting as well. By the way, left-wingers like the Young Turks pushed that narrative out there into the public. They encouraged these people to come out and riot on behalf of Jacob Blake, even though he came to somebody's home in violation of a restraining order. The restraining order was put in place because he was accused of sexually assaulting that person. He stole her car keys. He was about to take off in a car with children that he had no right to take, and the police were stopping a kidnapping. On top of that, he fought the cops and had a knife on him. So the shooting was 10 out of 10, most justified shooting of all time, and these Black Lives Matter rioters came out to tear up Kenosha anyway because of liars like Francesca Fiorentini, who decided to make it a story of evil white racism.
There was no self-defense in this. He's patrolling the streets with a loaded weapon. He's looking for it, right? And the fact that someone went after him with a skateboard, I'm sorry.
Yeah, someone who had seen him killing people.
Was shooting at people.
Yeah.
Again, Francesca Fiorentini just lying right here. Kyle Rittenhouse ended up engaging in the encounter with Rosenbaum, who attacked him, and Rittenhouse shot in self-defense. Then he started running towards the police. He was not actively shooting at people, and he was attacked from behind by Jump Kick Man, Gage Grosskreutz, and Anthony Huber. Anthony Huber started hitting him over the head with a skateboard. That is a deadly threat. That is a deadly weapon, and Kyle only shot when he was on the ground on his back. back and being attacked by Anthony Huber, being attacked by Jump Kick Man, and when Gage Grosskreutz, who was armed with a gun, raised it like he was going to shoot Kyle, and by the way, he told a friend, and this was posted on Facebook, that he intended on shooting him. So Kyle acted in perfect self-defense. Everybody can see it on video, and you guys trying to reframe it without showing the footage is very telling.
No, and remember, like with Zimmerman had a gun, ran up on a kid, and then, oh, now I'm within punching distance. I guess I have to protect myself.
Now that he's fighting back, I'm claiming self-defense. That's such BS.
Exactly. The person I assaulted does not have a right to self-defense. I do because I assaulted someone is a weird way to set things up.
You guys like that summary of the George Zimmerman Trayvon Martin case? It's totally backwards and insane in every possible way. George Zimmerman approached Trayvon Martin. He called 911, suspicious person in the neighborhood. Trayvon Martin, by all logical accounts, started fighting with Zimmerman. In fact, he was banging his head against the concrete, and we have evidence to support that in the head injuries and the blood on Zimmerman at the time that he was arrested. During the course of that fight, Zimmerman pulled out his gun and shot Trayvon Martin. You can feel however you want about these circumstances, and that's fine, but the fact of the matter is, he just made up that Zimmerman ran up and started punching Trayvon Martin, or killed him because he was within punching distance. Trayvon Martin was on top of Zimmerman, banging his head against the concrete. That is just a fact supported by the evidence.
Unless you want a legal regime where people who want to kill people can kill people. Certain types of people, sorry. Other types of people still have value in society.
And again, right here, they end up feeding into the misinformation 4 years out from the case that Kyle Rittenhouse killed some kind of minorities or something like that with that certain types of people mindset. Again, everybody shot by Kyle Rittenhouse, everybody who bullets connected with was a white person. And you could tell this misinformation is really powerful when you're watching the trial live, because you could see in the live chat people being shocked that Kyle shot white people because people like John Iadarola and Francesca Fiorentini worked tirelessly to misinform you about the case. So yet again, we have another baseless, fraudulent attack on Kyle Rittenhouse by these pathetic idiots who don't know how to let something go and don't even know the basics of the American legal system. Again, Francesca Fiorentini actually argued that because we live in a true crime era, that they might reopen the trial against Kyle Rittenhouse, even though that flies in the face of double jeopardy. You'd have to be an absolute ignoramus in order to believe this, in order to say this, and that makes her a perfect fit for TYT's damage report, in my opinion. But of course, I want to know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. Do these new text messages about a completely unrelated hypothetical scenario suddenly change the video evidence and all of the evidence of Kyle Rittenhouse acting in self-defense, or is that ridiculous and stupid, and are these people pathetic for trying to present that as so? If you like this video, then show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the madness of TYT. Till next time.